Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, listener Q&A episode about efficiency, long run tapering, and fatigue. And after that, World of Running updates about epic ultras, fall marathons, and more. Well, if you didn't catch it in my note a moment ago, this is our monthly Q&A episode where we answer your questions. It is our favorite time of the month because now we're speaking literally directly to some of you. Now, how do we speak directly to you, you might wonder? Because if you have questions and you would like us to answer them, we would love to do so.
Yeah.
All you need to do is go to atozrunning.com/question, and then in the contact form thing, just type your question and of course hit send before, because we won't know you're typing it unless you hit send. But the best part about this is that we get to talk about the things that are on your mind, and we like interacting with all of you. We say that a lot. We like interacting with runners, and so that's the easiest way for you to share a question with us. Of course, you can do it in all the other places where there's places to share things, like the social medias and all of that. But if you're looking for the fastest route, just go to atozrunning.com/question.
Yeah, we love to connect with you. On a couple episodes ago, we had Rob Andro on the show, and he said these great words of advice. He tells runners to say, instead of "I have to go for a run," "I get to go for a run." And Johnny commented on that post, "Thanks for the refocused, great words." Yeah. So it is really helpful to reshape how we're thinking about our run into a positive thing. And we have the power and capacity to do that. And most of us are choosing to do this. It is not something we're being forced to do. So having that perspective and carrying that out for our run is just a great way to enjoy the sport of running more.
Speaking of great ways to enjoy the sport of running, let's get on to your questions so we can answer all of the things that will help you better enjoy the sport of running. Well, first question to share this week, in fact, is one we were hoping to get to last month, but ran out of time. Sorry, Paul, but now we will.
Yes, it was a great question.
It was a great question, which is why we absolutely need to start with it here this month. So, Paul, and by the way, nice racing with you, Paul, last, whenever that was, earlier in the summer. And loads of fun to then hear from you again after the fact in the form of a question here. So this is especially fun to answer. And now, here's the context of the question. So, thinking about summer 10K race, where it's hot and humid, is it necessary in a situation like that for mid-race hydration? That's what Paul asks. Thinking, does it matter more or less if it's a person who sweats heavily, if you're running longer? So let's say your 10K takes you 60 minutes or it takes you 45 minutes. Does that matter one way or the other? And then Paul asked additional context because we were remembering recently around that time about the U.S. women's 10,000 meter trials race.
World
Championships trials or Olympic.
No, it was the U.S. Championships.
Right, that's the U.S. Championships is the World Trials race, so I probably just said that incorrectly. But anyway, so trying to remember how to describe this race. So in that race, the U.S. women's 10,000 was held at a different time than the rest of the world or U.S. Championships, and so as it was scheduled, it turned out to be forecasted to be very, very hot. So they rescheduled the race to another day and time. Which is not a terribly uncommon thing in situations like this when it's not a whole entire event. It's just one race. That's all that they had to reschedule. And so you see that happen every now and then. So here's then the question. Is that because of dangers from heat? And does that inform us when we're racing something like a 10K in the heat and humidity? So that's the question. Thank you for asking, Paul.
The short answer is if you are well hydrated, you shouldn't need hydration for a race of less than an hour. If your run is over an hour, you should plan to hydrate.
So if you're running 59 minutes, no, but 60 minutes and 10 seconds, yes.
If you're feeling thirst too, take a drink. If there is opportunity along the route to take hydration, do it. If you're feeling thirst, but that probably means that you didn't well hydrate before, or your body is just is giving you those signals because it's like really hot and humid out, and that it would just like quench your dryness.
That was an
that
interesting.
was really bad, guys.
Okay, so what Andy's trying to say is sometimes you just like feel dry and
Face, yeah.
you want some moisture like in your mouth or otherwise. But yeah, so there's two things to consider right off the bat here, which is exactly the point Andy's making. The first is hydration can't happen in 1 hour's time. So you cannot rehydrate a dehydrated body in that small amount of time.
10 minutes though.
You cannot rehydrate a
Not completely.
dehydrated body. Right.
But
So
10 minutes you
you
get
can have
benefits.
some benefit, some reprieve. But that's what Andy's point was about the hour thing. If you're running hard for an hour, you're really not going to need to take hydration. There's no substantial value to doing so in that amount of time, except for that it might alleviate discomfort. And so that was kind of the first barometer of, well, if I'm feeling thirsty, should I? And sure, I guess if it's available to you, sure. I don't, in any instance, I don't ever recommend people plan to carry hydration with them for a 10K race. If it's like 110 degrees and 95% humidity, that's a very different situation. But in general, so that's the first consideration. But then how do you ensure that you are hydrated so that you don't have to worry about it at all, Andy?
Yeah. So you'll want to make sure that you are getting sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. You want to get electrolytes and great meals, including water, before your race. So usually in the 24-hour period leading into a race that you know is going to have these kind of conditions, you have to start paying more attention and be making sure that your body is well hydrated. You want to drink over 16 ounces 2 hours before your event. And then water ingested 60 minutes before exercise will also help you with your thermoregulation, because a lot of the reason we want to stay hydrated, and when you talk about, Paul, having a race that's going to be so hot and humid, it's going to be temperature regulation that's going to make or break your performance that day, most likely. So for that thermoregulation, you want to be able to take that water beforehand to lower your heart rate during exercise, because dehydration causes increased heart rate, and also your muscles don't work as well if they're not well hydrated.
So that's the other key then. On the one side, dehydration in a general sense and comfort in a general sense. And on the other side, things like temperature regulation and such, which is why with the heat and humidity, whether you're a heavy sweater or not, you're likely to benefit more by ensuring you're better hydrated. So all around, the solution here, Paul, is don't get into a situation where you're running a 10K and you're realizing halfway through that you're dehydrated because you didn't drink enough water for the last 2 days. So that's a problem, and you don't want to be in that situation, because even if you start drinking something at that time, you're not really going to make much of a difference for yourself for the next 30 minutes. You're probably going to feel awful still the whole time.
That's so encouraging, Zach. You're probably going to still feel awful. But I have to say, it is very smart to take water cups and dump them on your head.
Oh, great.
When it's really hot out, because then, of course, it's going to be removing some of the heat from your skin, from the surface of your body, and it's going to make you feel better. And even having that perceived amount of comfort, whether or not that's really changing a lot that's happening with your muscular dynamics, you're going to feel better. So if you want to take water cups to drink because your mouth is dry or your body is hot and you want to dump it on your body, I say if you want it, if your body's desiring it, if you're thinking about it, it's going to be a distraction to you your whole run if you're like, I want to drink, but I'm not going to take it. So I would say take your body cues, but before all of that, it is imperative to make sure that you are well hydrated before the start of your race.
That's good. Good suggestions from Andy. All right. So thank you for asking, Paul. Now that we've solved your problems, or if we haven't, ask some more. Always good. Okay, next question here is from Mark. And Mark says, me again. Mark asks a lot of questions, which is good.
We love it.
We
Keep
do.
asking questions.
All right, so here's the context. I have been training for a half marathon in September after first marathon in May. Oh, yes. Congrats on that debut, by the way. Try to run the easy days easy And he gives some examples. And so we'll use the numbers because this is very helpful for the context. Easy might be like 9:30 to 10 minute per mile. And been dealing with a sore hip on the right side. It's kind of an off and on thing. Doing all the stretches, warm-ups, dynamic drills, strength training, physical therapy, everything. So great work, Mark. Sounds like you're doing everything, which is wonderful. However, still been kind of an annoyance for about a year, it sounds like. Okay, last year or so. Yep. And so when it's sore, when it's painful, it's very low on the pain scale. It's not a major problem. It goes away. Other days it's there. Some days it's not. And just kind of it's come and go. And then Mark, being a very dedicated runner, keeps his running journal, which is great because this is where moments like this matter. And over the past 8 months, noticing that it seems to be that the hip soreness is occurring less when doing more speed work or tempo runs or like harder efforts things. And in the last couple of weeks, he says, I have been testing the theory by running easy runs a little bit faster, closer to 9-minute pace. So that's 30 to 60 seconds a mile faster than normal. Okay. Seems to make a difference. I feel like at 9-minute pace, I can still talk if I'm running. So it's like still comfortable, but it doesn't hurt as much. Okay. And heart rate's a little bit higher. That's to be expected. Yep. Okay. So then the rest of the question is, as Mark states, so have you heard of this kind of an issue where, it's when you're running easy, it hurts more or it feels different at different kind of stride mechanics when you're running easy versus hard or hard versus easy? Okay. Oh, and the concern here is he's worried that he might be running his easy runs too hard at this current effort, even if it feels a little better. All right. Andy, do you want to start? We're going to have an argument on camera for you.
Well, Mark, I have experienced similar things with my hip labrum tears. And so I don't know what's going on with you. You've obviously sought out medical attention, but I've had these kinds of problems with having a difficulty firing correctly in my running due to injury. And so things happen to shut down around my hip specifically, and then the muscles surrounding that aren't functioning the way that they should. And so I have felt better running moderately harder as well, as opposed to running slower. I just seem to, it seems to just be shut down, and if it's not forced to take action. So like I've actually, during my runs, I'll do zombie drills. During my runs, I'll like
Forced
do activation. Yes. When I'm trying to keep it easy. But I hear what you're saying with the feeling that running faster is going to be most healthy at this stage in your injury journey. I'm not sure if you'd call it an injury or not right now. It sounds like it is to me because it's chronic. But my personal opinion on that is to, try to do those zombie drills, do activation, and try to run as easy as you can while still feeling that you are activating properly.
You don't want to fight me on it?
What?
You were saying earlier that you were going to argue with me on this one.
Well, because I thought you said always just run slow.
No, I'm.
If you're easy,
what a strange piece of advice.
Easy.
Just always run slow.
No, I know. But
no. So my first comment is that it's very likely, and we're not going to try to claim this is 100% clearly true, but it seems obvious that it's very likely that a different structural or positional elements in our running that we might feel differently. And so when you're running a little bit faster versus a little bit slower, there's a likely positional difference in how you're striking the ground and where your hip tilt is. Certainly there is some amount. I don't know if the difference is at 9-minute or 9:30, but the other side of it is just mechanical differences when you're running harder or easier. So when we take into account something like that, Mark, anytime you're moving in a different way, it can then, of course, aggravate or not aggravate, alleviate or not alleviate differently. So that's to Andy's point of when she's like feeling badly, sometimes when she changes the mechanics of what she's doing, it helps. That is naturally going to be a very possible thing here. And that doesn't have to mean, this is the part where Andy and I might potentially disagree, that does not mean you have to run a different effort to change those mechanics. So A good example, in fact, is something like those zombie drills, which force a mechanical change.
But your heart rate does go up when you do zombie
Does
drills.
not have to.
It does, though.
Doesn't when I do them.
Oh, really?
No, because you're just
Mr.
running
Fitness?
harder. See?
No, I'm not running harder. When you do zombie drills, it actually, you have to work a little harder.
That's
than,
what I just said. You're running harder. You're working harder. Those are synonymous.
Yeah,
So,
it's hard to do zombie drills.
but don't do them harder.
To do them
Keep the
all is
effort the
harder.
same, Andy, while you're doing the zombie drill.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Well, so here's the first question that I have to ask, Mark, before we can really truly have the best possible answer for you. It's you say you feel better on the harder efforts. Do you mean that you just drain the time that you're doing the harder effort, or surrounding it? So, like, do you feel better when you're doing 2 hard efforts a week than when you're doing none a week in general? Or you do only feel better when you're running harder? That's an important question.
That is important.
So if you're, in general, if you're feeling better when you're just having a more frequent, high activated state, higher neuromuscular activation in general helps you feel better for days on end. That's telling on one side, because what that's doing is that's suggesting that when you're doing things that encourage a higher level of running efficiency and running economy, that is sustained in other runs, and so you feel better in general. I would first consider that to be a very likely situation here, because that's very normal. For runners in general, we tend to feel better on all of our runs when we're doing an occasional high level of neuromuscular activity in a period of time, like within a week. So that matters. And then the key consideration here is, what could you do to try to identify if there are mechanical differences, if there are positional differences, and which ones feel better and worse. And so here's my test for you. You've already been testing lots of things, and you've been doing all the work, so I'm going to give you more. What I want you to do, Mark, is I want you to find an opportunity, whether you're on a track and someone's filming for you, or on a treadmill if you can't find someone to help you with this. But film yourself running in multiple different degrees of effort. So start at like super easy, and definitely within the degree of effort where you feel like you've had discomfort. Start at that and run for a little bit and see how it feels, and then be recording the whole time as well. And then do another degree of effort and reflect on how that feels while it's recording. So the key thing here is you have to know how you are feeling in each level of effort compared to what the recording's showing, because then what you're going to do is you're going to go watch these recordings. So do the super easy, then do like a regular kind of easy that's a little bit faster, like what you were just describing there, and then also do something like a strong, steady effort, tempo type of effort, and then finally do something at a very high effort, like go very fast for a short period of time. Okay, so do all of those things and consider how you felt in them, and then watch the footage. And what you're looking for is, when I was feeling a certain way, what did my mechanics and my position do? So for this to work, the footage has to be very similar. So like have the camera in the exact same spot, have it at the same height and position, which is why a treadmill tends to help for these kinds of things. And then you get at least some amount of information about, if I was running a certain way, was that when I was feeling badly? Then you have to try to replicate that mechanical motion or positional structure when you're running at other efforts, to see if you can get rid of the bad feelings by changing the mechanics. Okay, so that's my test for you. That's very complicated solution, but it matters with these kinds of things, because if you were doing something like a gait analysis, they would do all that kind of work for you. So if you have a chance to go somewhere where they can, put you on a treadmill with several cameras, that's exactly what they would do, and that's a great way to go. But I'm assuming you may or may not have access to that, and so this is a way you can do it by yourself. Okay, so all of that to be considered then. Here's our fundamental solution now. That's how you're going to diagnose it, but your solution is, when you're feeling badly in one sense but not in other senses, then it means that some kind of motion is irritating something. And so you have to get to the bottom of what's causing the irritation, and how can I minimize that as much as possible. And so you're already doing some of that other work. This is the thing that might be your final step that you haven't fully vetted yet. Maybe. All right. Next
Very
question.
good. Yes. So this question was from, we have a couple that are anonymous questions. So this is an anonymous question. So the plan that this runner is asking, is the plan that she is following has her doing her longest run 3 weeks before her race, which is the same weekend as she's doing a relay run, where she's doing a lot of miles.
Wait, the
but
race
they're
is
all
the same
split
weekend?
up on 3 weeks before her
Oh,
main
gotcha.
event. But it's supposed to be her last long run.
Okay.
So the plan has her doing 2 long runs at that same mileage in week 12 and 13. Is that too early to do the last longest run before the day? My goal is to simply finish under 5 hours, since it took me more than that last year. When should you cut back your long run before a marathon? Does it serve the same purpose if you split it up?
Okay.
We get the split up question quite often.
get
Let's
split up
tackle
question a
that
lot.
first. It is not accomplishing the same goal when you split up a run, especially the long run. The long run is intended to be all together. However, that weekend that you're doing the relay, I would not suggest adding to that weekend, because you are already going to be in a vulnerable state, very fatigued and running a whole lot. So I wouldn't suggest doing that on top of the relay. I think that that's not going to be a good time to do that. But you can do a long run 2 weeks before your marathon.
Well, yeah, okay. So let's understand this timeline then. So yes, definitely don't do an extra long run the weekend of the relay. I like
you
that
know how,
advice.
like, tagging on, because I think that some of us would be tempted. Okay, let's say one of our relay legs is 8 miles, tagging it on and then continuing to do the rest of the relay
Yeah,
later, and then getting 35 miles for the day.
So the timeline here then is 12 weeks, 13 weeks are long runs, and then I'm guessing 14 weeks is the relay. So 15, 16, 17. So this is about a 17-week training block, and the relay is 3 weeks before the race. So there's another weekend there, the week after the relay, that you could do another long run, right?
Yeah. But a question too of it being too early, I would say that it would be good to have another long run stimulus before the marathon, wouldn't you say?
Well, good and not harmful. It's doing an easy long run 3 weeks, 2 weeks even before the marathon race is not a problem if you're well conditioned. I mean, this isn't like you're not talking about I'm going to suddenly do a longer run than I've ever done. Don't do that 2 weeks before a marathon. But if it's like I've done 2.5 hours or 3 hours for a few weeks now, do it one more time 2 weeks before isn't going to be a problem unless you overdo the effort.
Yeah. Don't overdo the effort. I guess that's really key too. Yeah, that's a good point, Zach, is that you don't want to overdo that because you don't want to have the ramifications of delayed healing, which would break into your taper a bit. It would be like counterproductive that way. So,
which I guess raises the point of, depending on how that relay goes, you may not want to do another
exactly,
long run
that's true.
the next week. So
Yeah.
in these kinds of situations, when you're trying to figure out exactly when to do what in a season, especially as you near the goal race, keep in mind that the fragile time in terms of preparing for any kind of goal race, but especially for a marathon, the fragile time is the last 2 weeks, the marathon week and the week before. That's when you really want to make sure you're not overdoing anything. That's when you really want to make sure you're scaling everything back. Before that, the key for the few weeks before that is just making sure that you don't cross any lines and overdo something dramatically so that you're putting yourself in a deficit. Because keep in mind that while you can very easily recover in a day or two from a good, strong effort type of workout, even a good long run, a 3-hour long run, if you're used to that kind of thing, your body is familiar with that kind of effort, you can recover from that kind of stuff in a day or two. But if you overdo a long effort, it could take 2 to 4 weeks to fully recover, because now we're starting to talk about cellular level recovery challenges like the mitochondria and such. And so that's where you start getting into some of the well-published work that Hanson's has looked at about like really long, hard efforts are very dangerous, not because they hurt you or injure you, but because they take so long for your system at a cellular level, especially, to fully recover. So don't do that before a marathon when you're within that like 1 month out window.
So we have another anonymous question.
Yeah, this one was this was a very specific situation that has proven to be really challenging to overcome for many. And in this one in particular, the context was this runner finished a marathon, and 2 months later, is gearing up for another long race, around a marathon or 50K, something like that. And it happens to be a trail race, which is different too. Now, the runner's marathon season went really well. And so that's a perk here. Very healthy, very strong season. In fact, the marathon race itself was beyond the original goal and performance-wise. So that's great. Now, coming out of that marathon and starting to get ready for another long race, this time on trails, the runner's feeling lethargic and fatigued day after day. It's not really like, there's a little bit of an ebb and flow, but it's pretty consistent. Even took some downtime after the marathon. We're not talking about someone just went out the next day and started training for a 50K or something, but took a little bit of downtime and took it easy for a little bit to try to recover some, and just never quite can shake the fatigue, the lethargy. One other note here in the situation is in preparation for this trail race, the runner is also doing long runs on trails most weekends that are especially long as well. So now we get to the scenario of what can this runner do to try to overcome this lethargy, preferably before this big 50K race, but even whether before or after, what do you do in a situation like that where it just doesn't seem to kind of go away? And there's three possible sources, or I guess there could be more, but these are the three likeliest sources. So the first is it could be having nothing to do with the running side of things at all. It could be something like hydration, sleep, nutrition. And so you always want to
conditions.
Yeah, you always want to look at like your general health and what you're doing and such to just maintain good healthy habits. And it can also have to do with things like stress and so
hormones.
If your work schedule, all the stuff that affect how you feel and running aside can all be related here. So we always, whenever we're talking with someone about I'm feeling fatigued, I'm feeling lethargic, we look at the training certainly, but we first just ask the question, are you drinking enough water? Are you sleeping enough? Are you getting enough nutrition? And then the conversation breaks down to, are you getting the vitamins and nutrients, but also you're getting the macronutrients that you need, just having enough in your diet, all that kind of stuff. So that's one place we're always going to ask that question at any time. So look there, possibly first, simply because that's an easy place to see gaps and holes if they are there. Now, if they're not, the other two things have more to do with than the running side of it. And so there could be a lack of recovery day to day or in between big things, an overtraining effect in general. And so it doesn't have to be something as severe as like delayed onset muscle soreness, as much as it's just like, your system is not fully recharging between things. And this is often the case when we're doing things like extreme longer efforts or on terrain that is unstable and that's not familiar to us. And the reason why the terrain matters so much in a moment like this is because, take for instance, if I am a runner who runs most of my runs for months, if not years on end here on paved roads or bike paths or something, and then I go and I spend hours on trails weekend after weekend for a few weeks in a row, that takes its toll, because we're talking about muscles that are not used to moving in the way they're moving. We're talking about muscle fibers that are being taxed in ways that is uncommon. So the breakdown is higher than the rebuild
and the mental
initially.
Focus.
Yes, and there's that, but then there's also, add to the mental side of it, the central nervous system side of it too, because you're demanding something different from your central nervous system, a higher level of attention to what you're doing on a trail is by necessity. Otherwise, you're tripping and falling all over the place. And so there's a lot of layers to that where it suggests something like that is going to take a lot more out of me than a normal long run, even a normal long run. And so that's a place to look. Like, am I just really not fully recovering between things? So right away in this situation, our first answer to you here is, if you're doing that every weekend, change it to every other weekend. Do not do those extensively long trail runs every single weekend.
Unless that's what you're used to, because there's a lot of people who
right,
listen to this podcast.
But this
trail
person
runners.
isn't,
Yeah,
which
I
is
know.
why I'm answering the question that way. And so in that instance, make sure you're not overstimulating at a very challenging level something. And then the other side of it is the difference in stimulation in general. So now we're talking about, is it just that I need something, my system needs something different to try to get to a better active state. So I'm just feeling more comfortable in my running. And that's where, if you're truly fatigued, your system is just exhausted and you're not fully recovering, this is not the right solution. But if it's more of a lethargy, like I'm just having trouble feeling comfortable, like running, is not crisp. I'm not feeling very active when I'm running, but I'm not like necessarily exhausted. It's just not feeling great, so that's a little bit different. So if that's the case, then one of the first places we look is a training adjustment that specifically isolates high active state things. So we'll like throw in some sprint training, some hill sprints, some,
or
so,
just strides sometimes. Simply,
which is
simply strides.
sprint training.
Yeah.
So things like that. I'm not going to give away all our trade secrets here, so I'm not going to tell you what
We
exactly.
do, actually. We give away all of them on the A to Z Running podcast. So if you want to hear all the training secrets, do subscribe because we do share with you.
But the point being, there's a very specific structure we would throw in to the mix right away in a situation like this. If it's clear that that's the thing that's needed, we have to identify first that it's not some of these other areas, because you don't want to do something aggressive training-wise if your body just needs rest. So we have to be careful about that. But if that is indeed, we've ruled out some of the other things, this is something we try. Yeah. So what it comes back to is, if you're feeling sustained lethargy and or fatigue in your training, you got to look at the different things that can affect that, whether it's the training, the lifestyle stuff, the health and general stuff. And when you find an area that seems to be an area that's lacking something, then you fill it with what's the thing you need in there. And so the training stuff, you can get pretty creative with some different ways to add some new kinds of activation into your experience, but that's a good place to go.
Yeah, and after you look, maybe you have a doctor look too. Maybe you get some blood panels. Maybe you look at your family history. So all those things can be informative when you reach a point like this.
Indeed. So thank you to all who asked questions. And as you noticed, you don't have to put your name on the question. So that's another side of this, that if you would like us to answer a question, but you would rather us not answer you by name, we are glad to still do so. So just say so in your question and we'll stick with it. That being the case, remember that if you missed your chance this month, there will always be the next. And all you need to do is go to atozrunning.com/question.
Now let's get to the world of running.
Before we go to the public side of the world of running, our own runners and a couple updates here to share with you. Some great performances.
Yeah.
Just a lot of really good stuff going on these days. So Bill ran a 5K, second overall, which now notches the belt for... I mean, Bill, did you finish worse than third on any 5Ks
He
this summer?
podiumed all summer long.
Every single one.
All summer long.
Another solid effort. Nice work. Jax in a 5K was fourth overall.
Good job, Jax.
Julie in a half marathon, second age group. Mark, also same race, third age group. Andrew, also in that half marathon, third in age group.
Way to go, guys.
And Kirsty nearly ran a PR in the Crim 10 mile. And Chad tied for second. Was it a three-way tie?
It's a three-way tie.
A three-way tie for second in a backyard ultra, which is just... So I got to say, if you're not familiar with the backyard ultras, we've covered them just a little bit here and there in the past, and some impressive feats that have happened at some. But Chad just ran his first ever. This is his first backyard ultra.
On the podium.
And podiums, which is just
Way to go,
awesome.
Chad.
Nicely done. But what it is, a backyard ultra is an elimination race, which is super cool.
That's how he was able to tie with so many people, because it's based on your laps.
Right. And so by the very nature of it, how it works is you have to finish a lap within an hour. You get 1 hour, and it's like a 4 point. You put it here. 4.1. 4 and a sixth. What's a sixth of? Anyway, so it's 4 plus a little miles, and you have an hour to do it. And you do as many of them as you can until you don't finish one within that hour, and then you're out, right? And so it's a last person standing kind of race, which is so challenging of a mindset, because now it's no longer like I have to get to the finish line. It's like I have to just keep going and going until no one else is going.
Yeah.
How long can I do this? Yeah. So cool.
He said it was grueling, and he went 100 miles.
That's no small thing,
no,
Chad.
it's awesome.
Well done.
Way to go.
Well, let's get on to first of the list here for Alicia Monson.
Yes, Alicia Munson is on the rise. You've heard us talk about her on the podcast throughout the last 2 years, constantly. She's been on the podcast before, but we wanted to give her a huge shout out because she ran an almost American record in the 3,000 meter run, running a time of 8:26.61.
That's so fast.
And was edged out by Francine Niyonsaba,
Niyonsaba.
Niyonsaba. I was thinking
So he nearly won the race.
in 100th of a second.
And I have to say, as we're watching the race, and you should watch it because it was really cool. It looked like maybe Monson thought she had won the race because she was like
She's way
punishing
ahead.
this race. In the last 100, she was still strong. And so she has this slight, she's got the look on her face like, yes, I did it. And it was at the line when she was edged out.
Niyonsaba, yeah.
Coming like a charge from behind kind of scenario.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if she knew that someone was about to catch her, I wonder if she just would have just held the pedal down a little more aggressively and still won that race.
She said she's going to learn to lean, is what she wrote in her
Yeah. Okay.
Instagram
Well, that
post.
was really impressive. Great
Yeah.
running, Alicia. Awesome.
And as I mentioned, it was the second fastest time in U.S. history, second to Mary Slaney, who set the record back in 1985.
Whoa.
And that time is 8:25.83. So she missed it by about a second. At least she missed it by a second. So second on the list. Third is Jenny Simpson. Fourth, Shannon Rowberry. Fifth, Elise Cranny, who is also in this race. So she
Yeah.
moved herself up to number 5 on the all-time list.
That's
So.
just what incredible company. Too,
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's also Kara Goucher is next on the list.
Yep,
There, I
yep.
mean, just amazing.
Shailene Flanagan, number 9. Yeah, so it's a great list. I actually think I'll post that on social media. But it was cool that we had Alicia and Elise Cranny both move up on that list in this single race, which was at which race? Which
The,
Diamond
Lu-
League?
the Lausanne.
Lausanne. Yeah, I didn't.
don't know how to say it.
I didn't put it on here, but it was Lausanne.
Yeah.
Yep, the Diamond League there.
Which was an exciting meet all around.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we couldn't watch the whole entire thing, but we found a few events.
We
to
did
catch up
watch
on.
this race.
We did watch this race.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool.
And now we're moving up in distance quite a bit to the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc.
Oh, well
yeah.
done.
It had a distance of approximately 171 kilometers, which is 106 miles.
Why is it an approximate distance?
I think it's because it's the mountain. I don't know.
Because nobody really knows exactly how far anyone's running when they're doing these races.
Because it's really hard to
Yeah.
use a
I know. You
GPS
can't,
or a
can't
roller.
Really, yeah.
Like it's like, how do you actually?
You can't accurately
it?
measure mountain ultra races.
Yeah.
You really can't. You can get close, but
Yeah, there's a total elevation. This is the kicker. Total elevation gain of around 10,040 meters, which is
Oh.
32,940 feet.
Chad knows what that's like from his race earlier this summer.
Yeah, and it's widely regarded as one of the most difficult foot races in the world, and is one of the largest with more than 2,500
What?
starters. They say
How do
starters
that
because
many
a lot of people drop
run?
out.
Well, yeah. How do that many people run a
And
mountain
they have to
race?
qualify. I don't understand the full qualification system exactly, but there is a system in which you can qualify for a race like this. I'm sure that they want to make sure that you're able to do it safely.
Does
So
it start with a guts and fear test? Do you have the guts?
no
and
points
are you
in other
not
races,
afraid enough?
Zach.
Oh,
Yeah. So it starts and ends in France, but it also goes through both Italy and Switzerland.
of course it does, because you're
so-
running 100 miles in the middle of Europe. You gotta find
in
somewhere
the
to run.
Alps. Yep. And Kilian Jornet won and ran a course record of 19 hours and 49 minutes. And we've mentioned his name on the podcast because he is revered as one of the top ultra runners of all time. He's a 6-time champion of the Skyrunner World Series, and he holds a lot of fastest known times. And the major mountains that he currently holds the speed records are Matterhorn and Mont Blanc. And he's previously held speed records for these mountains, Denali, Kilimanjaro, and others. But they ended up being broken, but he held them previously. And fun fact, he's also a skier. He holds a 24-hour uphill skiing record.
Did you say uphill?
Uphill
skiing record?
skiing record.
Killian,
Yeah.
I would like to give you some advice.
Go down?
You can accomplish
Be so much more fun.
substantially more by going down the hill. All right.
8,274 feet is his 24-hour record.
Wait, up?
Up.
How do you go
Skiing up.
How do you do that? Where you just
McKenna Morley might know
just
because
goes-
she
just
said
goes
that
up.
she does uphill
Yeah.
skiing too.
Well,
This achievement was set in 2019, and since then he's been making a big impact on the ultra scene. So that was a impressive win by Killian. And the women's winner was Katie Scheid. In an interview with Run Far, Katie talks about how she runs by feel, not by time, which we always talk about here on the A to Z Running Podcast. Of course, one of the recommendations to be able to remove yourself from that is running a race that you can't really know your pace and your time. Like a trail race where they say it's approximately 106 miles.
I mean, I'm not going to go and recommend any of you go run a 100-mile
No.
mountain race.
But I enjoyed that she said that in the interview. I thought you'd appreciate that. I brought that up from the interview. And this year alone, Katie has won lots of races, but this year alone, she's won both Vale d'Oran by UTMB. It's the same series as this race. And that was 100K, and then the Maxi Race Marathon. So just this year, she's been winning things. And then, of course, this was a major win for her as well.
Wow. Some ultra things that are quite crazy. But if you're thinking to yourself, I don't think I can hardly stomach even hearing about races on mountains.
I get so impressed. I've never run an ultra, but I'm very impressed by them.
Certainly that. But let's talk about something that may be then more familiar. We're finding a happy medium in the middle. We talked about 3,000-meter races, ultra marathon races. Let's talk about marathons for a moment, because this fall is shaping up to be one of the most incredible marathon majors series of races ever. Because basically, like, everybody is running in these majors, and sounds like many, if not all of them, are saying things like, I could, be on world record shape. I could, beat the very best people, all this kind of stuff. So anyway, here's what I want to do for you for a moment, is I want to just mention who's planning on running each of the 4 majors this fall and why this is just so incredible. So London on the women's side. Whoa. First of all, Yelem Zerf Yahwala just ran a half marathon in Ireland, I think it is, the Antrim Coast half. She ran 64 minutes and 22 seconds, which is fast. She's
I'd say that's fast.
She's run
Pretty
like
fast.
40 seconds faster than that herself, and the world record's like a minute and a half faster. But the point is, she went through about halfway at world record pace, and then kind of just slowed, clearly just was not feeling like she had it that day, and so she just kind of slowed off the edge of it, but she was like punishing everybody, so she already had the race won. But the fact that she goes through 5K in 14:44, 10K in 29:52, and looking pretty strong still, that's great. Now, why am I saying that? Because she is also running the London Marathon.
Yeah.
And Yahwala has the fastest debut marathon of any woman ever. She ran 2:17 and change in her debut. So now she's coming back to London to race against Brigid Kosgei of Kenya, the world record holder currently.
Yep.
2:14:04 is her record. Wow. Also, Joycelyn Jepkosgei of Kenya, 8th fastest all time.
It's going to be spicy.
Yahwala's debut that I mentioned is also on the all-time list as 6th. So you've got the 1st, 6th, and 8th fastest ever times. Eilish McColgan's doing her debut marathon. Oh, yeah.
And she's been running everything well.
She's been great.
Every distance.
So she's doing that at London as well. So it's just going to be, this is going to be like a bombshell race. That sounds great. On the men's side, the London Marathon is no less amazing sounding.
No.
Because you have Kenenisa Bekele of Ethiopia, 2nd fastest all time. Remember, he ran 2 seconds slower than Kipchoge's world record.
And he still thinks he's going to get that record,
He still thinks that he can beat that time. Yep. Kipchoge also still thinks he can beat that time.
Yeah,
but
it's good.
Unfortunately, they're not racing each other this time. But Bekele is in London. Berhanu Legacy of Ethiopia, who's the 3rd fastest all-time race marathon time, is in London. Masanet Geramu of Ethiopia, who's the 4th fastest all-time, is running the race. And then you have Sise Lima of Ethiopia, who's the defending champ from London. He's also the 14th fastest ever. Kengo Suzuki of Japan, who holds the Japanese national record. Mo Farah himself, Mo Farah, running the London Marathon. Yes.
Mo's back.
Well, I mean, he didn't go anywhere.
I mean, kind of.
Well, he was hurt for a little bit, but
I feel like he did go away a little bit.
So that's the London Marathon, right?
Yeah.
And we're only just getting started. Now, let's go to Berlin.
Berlin.
Okay, well, Berlin's actually not quite as crazy of a
What?
field.
Well, U.S. star Kira
but-
D'Amato, I get to say it. I'm going to say it
Okay, yeah,
before
go ahead.
Zach does. Kira D'Amato is the top seed for the Berlin Marathon. I'm
So
so
cool.
geeked about this.
We were trying to figure out when is the last time an American has been the top seed in a World Marathon Majors of any
I don't know.
World Marathon Majors. And
Go Kira.
My
Go
best
Kira.
answer is
Go
it's
Kira.
been a long time. So that's cool. That's really cool. And she's got a race on her hands. Certainly Nancy Jelagat Meto of Kenya and Sarah Hall of USA are both planning to run this race. I think Sarah Hall is also entered in New York, but it's not uncommon for her to do
6
two
weeks
major
apart.
marathons 6 weeks apart. So, yep, we'll see about that. So Kira's clearly she's looking for a fast time and a possible marathon majors victory, which
That'd
is
be
exciting.
So incredible.
On the men's side in Berlin, we do have world record holder, the undisputed greatest marathoner of all time, Eliud Kipchoge, running,
Wow.
and has
I like
said
how you announced him like that.
has
Give me
said
chills.
he thinks he will run the world record again,
Yeeks.
which obviously he's done
Because it's
a
his.
bit, a fair bit, but that's really cool when he
That's
says
really
that.
cool.
So he's doing that. And this is actually a rematch with Gaia Adola of Ethiopia because the two of them in 2017 were racing Berlin, and Adola pushed Kipchoge to the line in that race.
Oh, that's
Like,
exciting.
it was tight.
Okay.
And that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was Adola's debut marathon as well, which remains his best time still. And so he's looking for,
Well, maybe they're
like,
good for each other.
yeah, we'll see.
And
So
then
that's pretty cool. We'll
in
see
Chicago,
how that goes.
we have Ruth Chepngetich, and she is from Kenya. She's 4th all time. You'll remember that she was 3rd at the World Championships Marathon.
Indeed. And interestingly enough, she now has what looks to be the slimmest race compared to all the other majors in the fall.
Chicago.
I know, it's very
Interesting.
interesting. Chicago isn't usually considered to be slim competitively,
Right.
but where we look at the performance lists for the other ones, in contrast, it's slimmer than them. Not
Still,
slim by
no,
any
it's
means.
never, ever slim. Yeah.
Still a majors. But Ruth Chepngetich headlining that one. And then let's jump right to New York.
Yeah.
Then, so the last one of the series in November will be in New York, and it's not likely to disappoint. So on the women's side, Paris Chepchirchir of Kenya.
Yeah, she didn't run at the World Championships, I don't believe. She had some injury or something. I
know
think I was
why.
reading. But we're excited to see her back on the scene.
Yeah, she holds the 5th fastest all time in the women's marathon. Lona Chemtai Salpeter of Israel, who's the 9th fastest all time.
Also a Masters runner, right? I believe so.
I don't know that.
I
Um,
believe she is.
And now I just realized that I've got something wrong here because I put 2 people as a 9th all time, and I know that they're not tied. I guess it's possible that they are tied. But the Gotitam Gebreselassie of Ethiopia, who just finished just world champion in the marathon, is coming back into New York. And so she also has a top 10 all-time time. And then Edna Kiplagat of Kenya, who is multiple-time majors champ, and should be mentioned that it's been a little bit now since her last big majors finish, and so it'd be interesting to see if she's got like a resurgence coming on. Sarah Hall's entered in the race, Des Linden of the U.S., and so we've got some strong Americans in that field as well for New York. And then Helen Obiri is making her debut.
Wow,
Yes.
Helen Obiri.
So the woman who wins everything
Yeah.
is now moving to her
That's
first
awesome.
marathon.
She runs now. She's running with On Athletics.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And moved to the U.S., and some have
Just recently.
Yeah,
like
some
this
have
year. This is
argued
breaking
that
news.
the main reason she moved to the U.S. was in preparation for this race.
Fantastic. Well, I did want to correct what I said. Salpeter is actually the same age as me. She's 33.
No, okay, she's not Masters runner. I know who you were thinking of, but that, not the
Someone
same
else
person.
from Israel. I was thinking
So
of.
on the men's side in New York, it also looks like it's going to be an interesting race because you've got Evans Chibet from Kenya, who's 7th all time, and then Daniel do Nascimento of Brazil, who holds the national record there. Abdi Nagy of Netherlands, who holds the national record there. So you've got a bunch of like best ofs their areas coming together in this one, which is always fun. And Galen Rupp's
Galen
running,
Rupp.
USA's
Yeah.
top marathoner, as it were, as well.
Wow. New York.
So fall
about them
marathons are
apples?
gonna be ouch. That kind of hurt a little bit.
Sorry.
Andy just punched me.
Because I was
and
really
I'm not
pleased
actually
with
sure
myself.
why.
No, because did you hear my joke?
No, I actually
said,
didn't.
How
I
about
just
them
felt
apples?
your punch.
Because New York is the big
Did you
apple.
hit me with your knuckle? That hurt.
Sorry.
I'm gonna have like a stiff
Sorry.
arm tomorrow. So anyway, that's gonna be exciting, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Now, that being the case, we're also looking forward to the next time you ask us a question.
Yeah.
So go to atozrunning.com/question to share your thoughts with us so that we can then feature you and your question on our next monthly Q&A episode. It's always at the end of the month, and if you don't get in for one, your question will be saved for the next one, and the next one, and the next one, depending on how long it takes to get to it. We will do that. So ask anytime.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.